scattered and starved. We had an event here we weren't planning for earlier. They say that if you can do Shakespeare, you can do anything. And I think, Ms. Black, we thank you for being here. Your career demonstrates that. From Portia to Vala, Aaron's son. That's some pretty Shakespearean dramatics going on right there.
I was going to say, you haven't seen me actually do Shakespeare, so it's very generous of you.
I would be shocked if you were anything less than mesmerizing.
Oh boy, I got a story about that.
Well, I think that's our cue, if you would like to begin.
And that's great. I have exactly that sort of question. I wanted to ask, given that you have such a range of roles within the genre and also a career outside of the genre, I wondered if you could talk a little about what the genre offers to you as an actor in terms of opportunities that you couldn't experience outside of it.
Good question. I think there aren't many opportunities for an actor to experience the level of range that I have, except in Shakespeare. So touring companies get to experience the incredible universe that Shakespeare himself created, where he has so many archetypal characters, and upon which so much of fiction subsequently has been based, or have been based. And science fiction, fantasy, action, this sort of that's sort of considered a genre in and of itself, has offered me more than most other genres could possibly have. As a child, seeing Linda Hamilton and Sigourney Weaver, I just had a feeling that was the sort of work that I would be doing if I was lucky enough to get roles as an actor. The genre lends itself to an interesting dichotomy, either the bimbo roles, which I think now is sort of a thing of the past, unless the performer and the writer, unless they're having a wink, and a wink, and there's a certain irreverence in the way that they're delivering the role, and it's a conscious decision. The women now are very empowered. They're flawed, otherwise it wouldn't be interesting to watch them. And they share the stage with the male characters, and so those things were very important to me growing up as a young feminist. But I've been so lucky that these roles have been, the women have been complex. They've been interesting. The stakes are higher, I think, in space than they are on Earth, because even you look at situational comedies, it's either a dysfunctional family at home or a dysfunctional family at work. Space, there's quite a lot more to offer in terms of scope. So it's apt that Shakespeare was mentioned in the introduction, because I think there's an incredible amount of scope offered for the performance therein.
Thank you.
Sorry, we're going clockwise. So
Okay.
Don?
I'm not prepared with a question just yet, but I'll defer to the next.
Okay. Adam?
Oh, my turn. I was last at Michael Hogan's press conference. So this is a treat to go second. What was it like for you being part of the Stargate SG1 cast at the end, and you were there for a couple of years versus the people for the decade who were there for a decade? What was it like from your perspective, that ending? Because I imagine it was quite different for you than the rest of the cast.
Yeah, I mean, I came into a show that was very established, which technically has its benefits because they've found their way and they know what they're doing. And the difficulty when you're shooting a pilot of something is that there isn't an inherent rhythm. And I'm a big believer in rhythm in general. And shorthand is one of the key ways that people operate in the film and television business as well, from a technical standpoint too. In order to get the day done, you can't have lengthy conversations that sort of wrap people's egos in cotton wool and make sure that everyone's being sort of taken care of in a sort of verbose way. So you do have to form that, it's like a circus troupe, you have to have a level of trust. And another aspect of this business, and I think it's the same with life in general, you have to, if you're going to succeed, you mustn't accept no for an answer, but you have to have the class and the taste to know what's happening in the room and know when it's your time to speak and when it's appropriate to act or not. And so I had that feeling on the last day of shooting that while I'd been part of something very historic in terms of, they made the Guinness Book of Records, the run of the show on SG1. I'd always felt that I was an invited guest, not a main player. So, and they certainly didn't make me feel that way. I mean, I felt that I was a very welcomed guest. And they certainly wanted me to feel as if I was one of their key players. But I felt that I knew my place, and I gave them some distance. And there were some moments on that last day where Amanda, Chris, and Michael stood there together, and they were very emotional. And Ben too, he was the same. We sort of felt that there was a moment they needed to have by themselves. And I also had this feeling that I'm kind of like the show killer. People bring me on at the end to add some kind of colour. It's like, well, we've tried everything else. Let's bring on Claudia Black. See what happens. Call it luck or bad luck, whatever it is. I mean, I felt that 10 years was an incredible run for a show. I was very privileged to be part of it. In terms of what it did for my career, I mean, I noticed that I am more, just on a basic level, more recognised and more recognisable. It was a more mainstream show in some ways than FarScape was. And visibility is important for actors these days. But it was good. I always like to leave before I've overstayed my welcome. So, if that answers your question.
Yeah, answers it very well.
And Jonathan, I think it's actually, sorry, Dr. Rowan.
I'm Joe.
Joe, I'm sorry. Back to you.
Oh, back to me. I have a follow-up question. Brilliant. I'm sorry, I wasn't expecting a follow-up. Prior to, I guess, just prior to FarScape, you were also had a supporting role in Pitch Black.
Mm-hmm.
Do you find that comes up a lot in conversations? Do you find that that's a role people reference, or?
I'm sorry, this tea is awful.
I have to go throw myself off the building.
You're also fired.
Fired. Sorry.
And I guess what was that? Was that your first real science fiction genre experience? Or had FarScape begun at that point?
No, I was doing a show in Auckland, New Zealand, called City Life. City rhyming with something else to do with excrement, that it was nicknamed after a while. And it was the home. I mean, Auckland and New Zealand itself was the home of Hercules and Xena. And I really wanted to work on Xena. I thought that the work that Lucy Lawless did and the role itself was seminal, and it was going to start to pave the way in television, as the role of Buffy had, and Sarah Michelle Gellar's work had started to pave the way in television for women to start playing these roles and for it to be acceptable. I mean, you have to sort of have like laws of averages. You need to see it enough to be comfortable with it to then, and Jon Stewart made a joke, I think, at the Academy Awards. He said, "How do you know when you're watching a movie that's set in the future? The president's black." And I think it's Einstein who said man is only capable of creating what man is capable of imagining. So there ends up being, so what happens in storytelling and in film and television is that we start to create our reality in that sense. And so I wanted to jump on that bandwagon because, as I've said, I saw the roles that women were playing in film, and I wanted to start doing that myself. And TV seemed, I'd done some TV already, and that seemed to be the way to start jumping on that bandwagon. So I found an agent in New Zealand, and I said, I'd like to do some Hercules and Xena, if that's possible. He said, sure. Booked the job on Hercules, and off I went. And they're always after some fresh blood, so that was easily enough done. And then I'm trying to remember what else I did. There was something called Beastmaster shooting in Queensland. So once I started FarScape, I did do that as well, and it all started to just flow. And I had been living in London, and my agent there had said, "Don't do any more work. Come back. We need to get you working here in London." And Pitch Black happened shortly after I got back to Australia for a visit. FarScape, the casting directors had asked me to audition for that. It was supposed to be an English girl playing the role, but in terms of the co-production rules, they weren't allowed to include her. Had to be someone from Australia with the correct paperwork. And they'd been asking me to read opposite other people who were auditioning for the other characters on FarScape. And they said, just read Aaron for us. And that's their backdoor way of getting people in that they like for the roles. And I got the call while I was filming Pitch Black to come down and screen test for FarScape. I ended up staying a lot longer than I'd expected. But that's how all the sort of genre work started to happen.
Okay, great.
Are you prepared yet, darling?
I think possibly.
No one's ever truly prepared, if that makes
No,
sense.
that's right. So that's going to be.
Yeah.
Okay. Have your genre-related roles been as rewarding as other roles you've had? Sci-fi, fantasy-related roles, have they been as, in perspective, in comparison?
I've loved everything I've done because I wasn't formally trained, so my education came from the set and the stage when I was working as I went. I mean, I did have some training here and there, but I didn't go to a school and get that sort of condensed 3-year or whatever training. Each role has been different. Each time I've learned something different. But in terms of what I was saying as a woman in the industry, it's been the genre work that's been the most exciting for me, because I think one is defined by the things that one turns down as much as the things that one accepts. And I had lots of roles coming my way over the last 10 years that I have turned down because I didn't think they sent out an appropriate message. And I didn't think that they really represented me and what I feel is important to say about being a woman now.
Oh, sorry, wait.
Okay. In your talk, you were talking about downstairs. You were talking about getting into producing and stuff like that. In the 200th episode of Stargate, you were pitching. How much is that going to be your style of pitching your story?
I'm trying to remember how Vala pitched.
You pitched the
Vala stole, basically, didn't she? She just stole stories.
stole
that she,
FarScape.
yes, exactly. And Gilligan's Island.
Yeah.
And, yes.
She fell back on what you knew.
The key, exactly. One must write what one knows as well. So for me, going into what I hope will be a successful pitching season with my new projects, the key factor is passion. And I think, and it, you know, they talk about it in, you know, I think in pitching seminars and in documents that discuss how to sort of, you know, do a successful pitch. Unless I'm invested in the material, I'm not going to be very interesting to listen to, and I'm not going to instill any confidence in the people to whom I'm pitching that I can be a storyteller of any value. And it just in general, I think on an energetic level, people who are excited and passionate about what they do are people that you want to be around. So I think
Vala
that's
was just going through every pitch she could, every show she's ever seen, because she wasn't really invested in anything.
I think Vala was so desperate at that point to be helpful, and she, having had no experience pitching or writing, she was just speaking before thinking. But I think she was very much trying to help, because everyone else in the room seemed to be so bored by it, and I think she was genuinely excited by the possibility and did her best.
I'd like to follow up on an earlier question. Looking back now, you've done 2 rather significant sci-fi shows with significant fan bases, and they're seminal and well regarded. Would you be hesitant now if someone came to you and said, we have this show, it takes place on a spaceship, and you'll be like the really kick-ass space commander type? Would you be hesitant about something up
And
there?
we see you wearing black leather and or latex. And you'll be working with Ben Browder. What do you say? My questions right now to people, if I'm going to commit, I mean, there's that, I think it's a cliche now, actors are quoted as saying, you know, the acting I give them for free, it's the time they pay me for. There's other sort of punchlines to that, but the acting pretty much, if we don't love what we're doing, we shouldn't be there. I have a family now. I have to really consider how many hours I'm going to be spending away from them, how challenging the role is going to be, how stimulating the role is going to be, who I'm going to be working with as a team, where it's going to shoot, what they hope to achieve with it, how much they're paying me. I have to be honest, but that wasn't the first thing I said.
It's good fun.
And if there's any room for collaboration as far as some of the details vis-a-vis the kick-ass female wearing the latex and leather playing with Ben Browder. Ben Browder, I would jump without thinking to work with him again, without question. And of course I added him to your question rather than you mentioning it yourself. There are certain things, Michael as well, Michael Shanks, in a heartbeat. There has to be, overriding all of that, there does need to be an original, unique aspect to the show, or I'm not interested. No one wants to see something rehashed. And even though they say there may only be 13 original stories retold or reinterpreted, or 26, whatever the quote is, I have to believe that we're bringing something fresh and new to audiences, because creativity is about invention, if not reinvention, to me. So it's the fresh spin, it's the fresh angle, the new perspective, whether it be a wink to the audience. I mean, we obviously had a wink to the audience playing Vala in that moment on SG1 where she sees Ben Browder's character, but I want more than the wink if it's going to be long term.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Joe.
The follow-up question.
Oh, the follow-up.
Shakespeare's female characters are extraordinarily strong women by and large, and interesting and deep and flawed. And as you were saying, that's becoming more the norm in science fiction. Is that becoming more the norm, do you think, in mainstream films as well, and what's bleeding into what? Is there a cause and effect there?
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing was Shakespeare had written incredible roles for women, but women weren't allowed to play them. It was men in dress. So that's where we needed to catch up. First of all, we needed to accept that women had a place in the business. There's very, very juicy roles out there for women in television. Most of my male friends who are actors say that there are way more interesting roles for women right now in the last 2 pilot seasons, as dire as things are right now in the industry. And the pilots that I'm reading, the women are, it's almost become a cliche in and of itself. She's flawed, she's brilliant, she's, whatever. I mean, it's just the adjectives that they're using to describe these women, it's almost impossible that a woman could be all that. And yet, now having become a mother and having to wear multiple hats, I can see what it's like to try and be a woman these days and try and do everything well. And I feel that pressure, and I find that it's really tough. And my mother, who's a big inspiration to me, has a very accomplished academic career, but had very strong values at the same time about how her children should be raised. And that's being reflected in the work that I'm reading right now about women and the choices they have to make and trying to have it all, do it all, be it all. It's that's dramatic and it's interesting. To be an English girl playing the role, but
Can contact you to do any guest appearances or anything like that?
in their movies, I think. I mean, there's been talk of them doing some movies. My favourite moment on Stargate. I mean, I know I could feel while we were filming Prometheus that there was an alchemy, that there was something in terms of chemistry with Michael and Andy Makita, the director, and when you feel that, I mean, it's that whole scenario. It's like being the new kid in school and you walk into the cafeteria and you're holding your tray and you just think, please, someone give me eye contact and a smile, because I need somewhere to sit and I'd love to sit with someone. And so that, to me, he was my first entry point, Michael, into the production from the cast. And we had an instant rapport and an instant respect for one another. But I have a soft spot for everyone. He was my go-to guy. I spent so much of my time with him, and we always knew we could rely on each other. And it's part of your job when you're the key storytellers in an episode. You're telling the A story. I believe it's the actor's responsibility to sort of really serve that storyline. And Michael and I would always chat. We'd always say, are we serving this? What's the clearest way to do this? What's the clearest way to say this and convey it? If we didn't believe it was on the page or didn't understand what was on the page, we made sure that we knew exactly, what was required of us and expected of us. And then I also think it's an actor's job to try and deliver more than anyone is expecting. So, and I think Michael and I, our odds with all of that really high. I think we really, considering what was expected of us, what we were given, there was a large bulk of material for the two of us. We enjoyed every single day that we worked together. And there was a particular day where Michael was really, I was really overworked, I have to admit. I was the new toy, and everyone wanted to play with that toy, story-wise. And I got very exhausted, but Michael was such a soft place for me to land in that environment and under those conditions. But there was a particular day when Michael had this unbelievable monologue. And, his whole thing as Daniel is, it's got to come out quickly because I'm incredibly bright and I know this information, and so therefore it has to come off my tongue incredibly trippingly, and then blah, blah, blah. And so as an actor, there's this huge pressure to know the words, obviously verbatim, but because, you can't make this stuff up. If there's a science in the words, it's got to make sense. And it was tough. He was tired and he hit a wall. And I took him aside and I said, let's do it, buddy. Let's run him. He was like, oh, no, I'll be fine. I said, no, buddy, let's do it. Let's run him. And he was just so Canadian about it. Don't help. I'm fine. I'll be fine. No, please. No, you do your, no. And I said, let's do him, buddy. And I sat there with him and we did it. And we did it. And we did it. And we went over and over and over and over them. So because he's like my scuba diving buddy. I just wasn't prepared to let him go down on his own. And I know what he could do, and I wasn't prepared to let him walk off that set that day feeling disappointed in any way. And it was my job, as I saw it, to help him get through it. And that was a good moment for me because he let me in, and he got through it, and he did a brilliant job. And, that's what it's about. Long-term television, long-form television is about working as a team. So that was another great moment for me, was, just knowing that I felt I had a job to do that isn't necessarily in the job description, and it's those choices you make and not accepting no for an answer from your teammate. So, yeah, lots of fond memories, but they're the ones that aren't so predictable that I think I still remember.
And we'll throw a last question to Kim.
Okay, if they want to know, my audience is watching.
Live.
They want to know if you want to continue doing the Stargate Atlantis. And also, if you like filming in BC.
Stargate Atlantis is...
Or, sorry, the other one.
Stargate Universe?
Yeah.
Well, one waits to be asked, first of all. That's that's the English side of me. It would be, what's the role? I hear that the promo is incredible. I haven't seen it yet. Sounds like they've taken it in a really interesting, bold, edgy direction. That's exciting. I'm really proud of them for making a really bold choice. They've got an incredible cast that they've assembled. Who would want to be involved in that? And you have to go where the work is. There's no point in being an actor without an audience. It's not fulfilling. You don't grow. You can do it in front of the mirror as much as you like, but it's one of those jobs that requires an audience at some point. So I have no issues whatsoever with doing genre work in future. So it's about, who's the character, who will I be playing, who will I be playing with, and how much do they pay? Quite honestly.
Well, I want to thank Ms. Black for coming and doing this for us. I know it's been a very long day for you. Before we leave, is there anything you would like to share? You have a captive audience. You have a captive live audience.
I know, this is cool. This is my first live podcast, I think. have to do something that proves that this is live. Just kidding. That was a bit dark. I'm getting thumbs up over there. What do I want to say? I want to say that in the last 10 years that I've been working in science fiction, I've met incredibly insightful, intelligent, passionate, thoughtful people, if I haven't said thoughtful already, on both sides of the camera. And that means on set, in the writer's office, but also at conventions, which is an aspect of this particular genre that most actors don't get to experience. There's been a lot of privileges, and there's been, the thing I love about science fiction the most is our ability to explore the human condition from a different perspective. And through the characters that I've had the privilege of playing and the joy of playing, I've learned a lot about myself, and I'm very humbled by the people that I've met at conventions in particular, and from the things that I've read online and from all the support we've had. I'll never cease to be amazed and impressed and in awe of the fact that fans, were not for fans, we wouldn't have been able to shoot the Peacekeeper Wars. I'm impressed by what the internet has done in terms of bringing communities of people together. And while TV in itself in the old days used to be a sort of a family experience, I think you guys have been able to sort of recreate that concept. While you may be watching it by yourselves, you're definitely getting together and personalizing the experience of watching television. I'm a fan of television as a medium, and obviously of film and theatre, but I'm very grateful that there's a strong enough audience out there for me that I'm able to do what I would choose first to do for a living, and I'm very humbled and very grateful.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.